So if you're into your bike porn, you're going to love this. Ducati's V4 Superleggera, arguably the most exciting bike of 2020 and the only homologated machine with a carbon fibre frame, swing arm and wheels. As the name suggests, this thing is super lightweight, weighing in at just 159 kg, 16 kg less than a V4S Panigale. At the heart of this bike is a stonking V4 motor, which is largely based around the V4Rs. The only difference being this has got a dry clutch and it's got lightweight cams, which means the output is cranked up to 221 brake horsepower. It's an absolute animal. And that's in road legal trim. If you really want to go to town, you can fit the race system that comes with this bike and crank that output up by another 10 brake horsepower. Or to give you some perspective, making this bike around 10 brake horsepower less than what you'd find on a World Superbike grid. And there's no ignoring those beautiful carbon fibre biplane wings that create 50 kg of downforce at just under 170 miles per hour, which is more than what the current MotoGP bikes' aero wings produce. Every which way you look at this bike, it's dripping in performance, in detail, in beauty. I could bang on all day about features like the Öhlins MPX forks, the Brembo Stylema R calipers. It's absolutely ludicrous what you get in this package. But what would you expect from a machine that costs just under £90,000? This is no bargain basement. If you want the best, you have to pay for it, and this is what you're going to get. That's enough about the specs. I want to talk to you about what it's like to actually ride this bike. So this is one of my friend's motorcycles. He bought it, he put 600 miles on it, and he gave me the key, which is nothing short of f***ing mental. I've ridden some pretty special bikes in my time, from 500 GP machines to World Superbikes and one-off prototypes. But this bike here got me nervous in a wholly different way. Let's start by saying there are only 500 of these available in the world. They're all sold out, and I knew that if I damaged it in any which way, it wasn't going to go down very well. To ease myself into the experience, I started off by banging in around 300 road miles. And that's when I really started to fall in love with this bike. Yes, I knew it was lightweight. Yes, I knew it was powerful. But how did those translate to the riding experience? Well, it actually made for a really usable, really fun road bike. It wasn't the animal I was expecting it to be. The V4 engine is really usable. It's not a brute lowdown. Yes, it's torquey, but it's drivable. And it's only when you increase the revs and you get it really buzzing up over 10,000 RPM that this thing becomes insane. So on the roads, it's really quite manageable. The same goes for the way that the bike would change direction through corners, you know, how quickly it would stop and stuff like that. It just made for a very compliant, very exciting, charismatic motorcycle. This bike made me feel so special, blitzing around on the roads, listening to that V4 engine roar through those beautiful standard Akrapovic exhaust cans, and hearing the jamboree that comes from that dry clutch there. You've got to experience a bike like this to appreciate just how much commotion it actually makes as you're riding, and it's a good noise. Probably the scariest thing about riding this bike is the knowledge that if I crashed it, I'd have been in so much trouble and so much debt. And it kind of took me quite a bit of time to really get stuck in and, you know, scratching around on the roads and all that kind of stuff and building my confidence for that very reason. But because it rode so well and it was so obliging, when I did get into the flow of it, I just treated it like a normal V4, just that little bit of zest. But even as you're riding it, there are so many reminders of this thing being extra special. Yes, you've got the visual representations of all the carbon fibre all around the bike, and you've got the fancy detailing on the top yoke that tells you how bespoke this is, number 106 of 500. You've got so many features that make you realise this bike is super trick, super special, and deserving of some respect. And I kind of went along those lines, especially because I still had to clock a load of miles before I could give this bike the beans. So how well suited is it to the road? Well, being honest, it's okay. It's an exceptional bike, it turns head, it makes you feel excited, but it is on that firm side, and you do tend to find that that engine can get a little bit hunty low down, especially if you're in like one of the sportier maps. You have to kind of dial things back on the electronics. There are all those kind of features on tap, so you can just dial in and make this bike what you want it to be. But in terms of sheer performance, I wasn't really able to get the best out of this bike on the roads. So the only choice we had was to take it to Cadwell Park, and that's when the fun really began. 1,500 miles now on the clock, I was able to go to my local circuit, my favourite place in the world, and really give this bike a good see into. By this point in time as well, I'd kind of got over the price tag. I was worrying less about that, and I was worrying more about missing out on the experience that this bike has to offer. So the first time I got it open wide down Cadwell Start Straight, I was impressed. I loved it. It came to life much like the V4R motor does. Really up the top, it was buzzing, it was pokey, gave me that good punch out of barn, and I was away. I was just in my little zone, firing into corners and coming to grips with just how brilliant and agile this bike actually is. It's a lot more agile than a V4S or a V4R. You really can tell the difference of the weight drop between this and any other Panigale out there. It felt more agile, it felt more precise, but it also felt a lot more vague. That's the thing with carbon fibre. I mean, this thing's got carbon wheels, carbon frame, carbon everything. And for all its benefits, you have to appreciate that it's not as talkative. That's the downside to these precious materials. And that made it a little bit harder to trust in, the agility of the bike and, that competence of firing it into a corner and thinking, okay, have I got a good feel from the front end or, whatever. It took me a little bit of time to actually come to grips with the reality that I was safe, the bike was in its zone, and probably I wasn't even tickling it. That was the other thing with this, that's a track, as I said, I'm used to going to all the time and pushing bikes to their max, and quite often crashing there as well. And that's one thing I really didn't want to do with this bike. So I kind of weaned things back a little bit, sitting in kind of high 37s, low 38s, in my comfort zone, if you like, but having a belter of a time. I love the way this bike punched out of corners. I love the way this bike jumped into bends. I loved how stable it was. I loved how the electronics allowed me to wind that throttle wide and not risk a high side or a big slide or anything like that. I felt pretty safe and secure. I felt more safe on this than I have on lesser priced bikes that are weightier and less powerful. So after a day on track, I was back out on the road and kind of, I guess, a little bit deflated. I knew now what this bike was capable of, and because of speed restrictions, because of built-up areas, because of cars and stuff like that and bits of crap on the road, just wasn't able to tap back into this bike's potential. So it's quite sad. I think what it just reaffirmed is that the V4 Superleggera is born for the track. It's a luxury that you get to ride around on a machine like this on the roads, but it's not where it belongs. Those Brembo Stylema R's are absolutely awesome. On road, on track, give them a squeeze and they soon get the rear of this bike getting flighty and excited. They'll stop you in so little time. They're unbelievable. I never really set to trying to adjust the Olin suspension, front or rear. I just got on and rode it. But I imagine there'd be a lot of time found and a lot of comfort on the road or on the circuit if you got tweaking. There's so much adjustability on tap, as you'd expect on such premium products. Is it a comfy bike? To be honest, I don't think Ducati really gave too much thought to that issue, but as it happens, the bars are nice and wide, the pegs are relatively low and relaxed, and my only real gripe is the seat, which gets so hot, it leaves you feeling like you're carrying around a pair of roast chestnuts. Nothing about this bike is cheap, including the Pirelli Supercorsa SP tyres, which have a nice little red band around them and set you back £1,600 for the pleasure. I guess the real question is it 3 times the bike of a Ducati V4R? Because it's 3 times the price tag or thereabouts. And the truth is, I don't know, from a pure performance point of view, not really. I mean, it makes a couple of horsepower more, and yes, it's that bit lighter and you can probably get a little bit more potential out of this bike on a racetrack. But in terms of road riding, no, it actually felt really quite similar. Special, but similar enough to relate to that V4R, which is already a special pricey bike. In terms of exoticness, is that a real word? In terms of raw appeal, it definitely bats the V4R and any other production motorcycle on the market right out of the park. This thing is that next level. I've loved riding around on it. As I've said already, it made me feel really special. I love just checking out the details, looking at things like the inscribed name on the camshaft cover by the guy who went and timed this bike up in the Bologna factory. It's just got such pedigree to it, and nothing can come close to that. And I think that really does help you justify the pricing. You're buying a part of history here. There will never be any more of these made. This bike is Euro 4. So already, Ducati's produced a bike here that it won't be able to produce to this spec next year. I'm just grateful that manufacturers like Ducati have gone to this extent to build something this brilliant, this exciting. This is the 2020 pinup. This is the pushing of the engineering envelope to that whole new place. This is next level.